Hi everyone, welcome. This bin over here with this fancy label that says RW, red wigglers, ENC, European night crawlers, and blue worms, those are the Indian blue worms. To me that's a bit much, so I just refer to the worms that inhabit that bin as my mixed red worms. And the mixed red worms are now 175 days of age. We set up an interesting bin for these guys, because the bedding that we gave them was made out of twine. Twine, you ask? What do you mean? What is twine? Twine? Well, it's that rope. It's that rope that you see over here dangling from the ceiling. I kind of sorted through my collection of this stuff, and I just hung it off of a bar that's up there near the ceiling. And that's not all of it either. I got even more over here. A few scraps of that thick stuff that's dangling, and even a whole bunch of the thinner stuff like what I use out in the garden and stuff like that. And I keep thinking to myself, stuff's been sitting around for some time now. It'd be good to come up with some sort of an idea for all that. And I got a couple ideas brewing, but that's something for the future. As far as these worms go, the mixed red worms, like I said, the system's been in service 175 days, over which time we've fed them 14 times. And I got a nice little feeding for them today, for feeding 15 after 10 days since the last check-in. Hopefully they're ready for more food. So we're going to get the bin up on the bench. I'll clear all these other things out of the way, and we're going to get to work feeding them. So let's get started. I stopped off in the kitchen to grab some stuff from the freezer. This banana peel, this assembly of mixed fruits and veggies. There was also a very old everything bagel, which you might even see a little reflection of the light that is coming off the water that this stuff is soaking in. And this is just some of that string that you see wrapped around when you buy a pastry or a cake or something at the bakery, and they wrap the box. That's some of that cloth. Oh, interesting. Some of that cloth string, which I figured would be an easy thing to compost, and of all places to put it, this place with the twine seems like the most sensible bin to get that stuff. And you know what? Here I am, out of habit, using my left hand, but I have somehow managed to overlook putting my glove on. Alright, I was just trying to get these little guys off the plastic covered cardboard, but hopefully they can just find themselves a little plot of damp stuff to camp out next to and stay moist and comfortable while we take care of feeding. So guess what? 3 feeding zone indicators. That's because besides putting food down the middle, we also put stuff out along those 2 edges. But something we've been doing is alternating the edges. So on this go around, we're going to feed out on these 2 edges in addition to the typical pattern of putting stuff down the middle. That's more like it. Now we can dig in. So my first observation with this system when I removed it from the shelf to bring it over here to the bench was the weight of the system. Very heavy, which to me typically equates to a system that probably has a lot more moisture than it needs. I mean, it is true that we're definitely approaching the bin's capacity, and this is not one of the normal size bins that I have. I have a couple. How many I got? 3, 4 of these somewhat larger. I treat these as 7-gallon capacity. I treat the other ones as 5-gallon capacity. So the fact that we've got one of my larger size bins over here, which is slowly approaching its storage capacity, might mean I've gone a little overboard somewhere, probably with the addition of bedding. So I think today, just in the interest of not making the system even more loaded with stuff, I think we're going to skip the addition of bedding today. Hopefully it doesn't end up becoming an issue, but I always wanted to, in my mind, remember that all the twine in here is technically their bedding, but I'm thinking of it more in terms of bedding that they could make use of in terms of a carbon-rich food source. So Alright, so for whatever reason I went to that corner over there and I figured I would just start sweeping across, but now that takes us immediately into feeding zone 1 of 3, one of the edge feedings. I guess the part of the reason I like this switching around of feeding locations, and it's you know, something I've done in many other cases where perhaps I just do the ping pong, switching the feeding location from one edge to the opposite edge, the facing edge, or pocket feedings going around the 4 corners in some sort of a circular fashion, around and around and around. But this thing that we're doing here is unique. I don't think we've done anything like this in the past. The whole thing of switching the flanking feeding zones from one spot to the other. So, oh boy. I mean, I guess just the presence of all these worms gave me this little bit of a gut feeling that maybe there's still some leftovers in here, and maybe that's what's in the middle of this pile of worms, but I'm not really going to go digging around for it. Maybe there's some leftovers, but we're not feeding in the same spot. We're feeding in a spot that's not been fed for 2 check-in cycles. All right. I do need to be careful, you know, I'm so used to being able to kind of just be sort of carefree plowing through the material in my systems, but here I've got all these things that are trying to whip around and splatter material all over the place, and I don't need that. So I guess this pumpkin stem was most likely excavated from this edge feeding zone, so why don't we just leave it there, I guess? I don't know. Making it up as I go along. But as long as we're sort of going down that road of checking feeding zones, we might as well check this outer edge closer to me as well, where we're probably going to see more of the same. And just as I say that, I encounter another pumpkin stem, so no surprise. Here's some bedding that must have been used last time. Still nothing that I would consider as leftovers. Obviously the pumpkin stem is to some degree a leftover, but at some point it sort of just becomes just a I don't know, like a decoration. It's something that I know is gradually breaking down very, very slowly. And over that entire period of it breaking down, the worms are gradually chipping away at it, but it's more like a, it's almost like in that permanent bedding category, you know. Some people use wood chips or other things I've seen where the bedding just sticks around and never seems to vanish. And I'm sure it's vanishing at some rate, but to a certain point, it's almost like a bedding that you can count on being there, but perhaps one that the worms can't count on being readily available as a food substance, and might take some time. So yeah, I'm feeling like it's probably a very good idea for us to not add material to this system. It is feeling a little bit cramped. So all right, so here I am already excavating the new feeding zones, but we've not even checked the center feeding zone, see how they're doing on the last meal. So the only reason we're able to have a center feeding zone was because at the very beginning we sort of tugged and pulled, and all this twine used to be very intertwined, I guess is the right word for it. And I smell citrus. I smell some orange peel. So we wanted to kind of pre-dig a spot where we can consistently come back to and easily find an opening that we can drop stuff into. Because everywhere else it would be a bit difficult to be able to just open up something. But more recently this stuff's been breaking apart very easily and enabling us to just dig in. And that's what we did last time. We kind of just upturned the whole system, and I think that was kind of cool. But I think it's time to start dropping in their foods. Let's give them this yummy bagel here. So so I guess we're just providing a little extra moisture there too. So I figured each of our feeding zones would get a piece of that bagel and this little piece of to be composted cotton string. If I had some sort of a cotton composting experiment going on, then maybe that would be the right place to go. But right now, the only type of fabric material that I've got a composting experiment going on with is wool. So putting cotton in there might not have been exactly the perfect fit. And wow, yeah, so I know all this food's going to collapse and kind of become smaller in terms of how much space it occupies as it thaws out and gets consumed by the wormies. But it just feels like after adding, you know, a good amount of stuff, you know, whatever amount of stuff that makes up what fits into this tray, it just feels like the whole system's coming at me like off the table, because there's just so much stuff in here. Yeah, the addition of no new bedding, I think, was a must. And I think just because of the heavy weight of the system, I was very reluctant to put in those drippings, the moisture that was collected underneath those bagel bits that I was trying to pre-dampen before feeding. So it almost makes me wonder if it might be a good idea to come up with some sort of a novel way to let this system lose some of its moisture content, because, you know, at this point putting this back on pretty well protects the system and lets very little moisture out, perhaps a little bit around the edges. So I don't know. We'll leave it this way for now. If I totally space out and forget to do anything about it, perhaps we'll be dealing with a fairly damp system next time. I was tempted to get my spray bottle and just squirt all this stuff back into the bin, but I don't want to add moisture. Perhaps I'll kind of use a napkin or something, but I'm not going to keep you around for that. That's boring. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.